The American Civil War was one of the greatest conflicts in the United States history. This war, which began in 1861 and finally ended in 1865, was a war between the southern and northern regions of the United States, and ultimately ended in a great victory for the North. Each side was fighting for a cause, but once the Civil War finally ended, how exactly did the nation change? This has been the core of many debates in the past, but tonight, on American Civil War, Brother versus Brother, we will tackle how America was fundamentally changed following this crucial conflict in the United States history. Prior to the Civil War, the country had very contrasting views on the nature in which the growing nation should be governed. The northern states adopted the idea of nationalism, which is the belief that the interests of the nation as a whole are of primary importance. Whereas the southern states believed that the best way to rule the country was through sectionalism, or the belief that there should be loyalty to a particular region of the nation, but not the nation as a whole. It is impossible for a nation to grow with states choosing to govern themselves. With these conflicting views, it was obvious that a change needed to be made. Once the North won, they forced the idea of nationalism onto the South, making the country more unified in its way of governing. The laws were now governing each state equally rather than the state or region having too much power to act independently. In the aftermath of the Civil War, these steps in unifying the reforming nation were crucial and provided answers for questions that previously did not have a solution. America was not only changed politically, but socially as well, through the newly founded freedom awarded to the African Americans. Post-Civil War, the Constitution was revised to include 3 new amendments. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which became known as the Civil War Amendments, stated found rights for African Americans. The 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, was passed December 6, 1865. The 14th Amendment addresses citizenship rights and equal protection of laws, and was aimed at giving all Americans the right to citizenship, regardless of ethnic and racial differences. The 15th, the last of these amendments, granted African American men the right to vote. These strides were monumental and ensured equality for recently freed slaves. It was no longer legal for one man to own another, which is a huge step towards the morality of the growing nation. These newfound rights were truly significant. However, African Americans would not be given more rights until almost a century later, which makes these steps particularly important. These new amendments were the first building blocks in which the reforming nation would become more effective and cohesive as a whole. With the South devastated by the effects of the Civil War, their attempts at Reconstruction resulted in economic diversification without slavery. Wealthy landowners, once dependent on slavery to raise income, were now forced to adopt new ways of making profit without doing any physical labor. Sharecropping became the new way of working the land. Since the Civil War ended slavery, all of the money that was invested in slavery was wiped out. So now how would the wealthy landowners get their land worked and turn profit? Since they were unable to pay their laborers, they offered a section of their land to be farmed by the newly emancipated African Americans in exchange for a portion of their crops. This allowed a new solution for both sides of the conflict, since the African Americans had a place to live freely, while the landowners were able to earn money from their land without paying wages. Reconstruction also brought about other changes in the Southern economy. For instance, they became more diverse with new iron, steel, and textile mills. This allowed the South to move forward and grow with the rest of the country, even in the wake of the devastating war. These economic changes helped to rebuild the South, therefore helped to reform the Union of America. To conclude tonight's segment on American Civil War, Brother versus Brother, The United States Civil War fundamentally changed the nation, and it became a more unified country with common goals. Be sure to join us next week, where we will touch upon another aspect of America's Civil War.